Okay, good afternoon, everybody. As you get settled in, welcome to the Firefighter Cancer Initiative monthly seminar series. We'll give just an extra minute for folks to trickle into the room as I see attendees that are joining, and then we'll go ahead and begin shortly with our presenter. Okay, so we're just at time, so 5 minutes just after the hour. Let's go ahead and get started. So good afternoon and welcome from the University of Miami Miller School of Medicine. You're at the Firefighter Cancer Initiative seminar series. This is our monthly series to bring updates and progress on the various aspects of research, service, and education that happens through the Firefighter Cancer Initiative. Today, we're really fortunate to have one of our own scientists present. This is Dr. Natasha Schaefer Solle. She's a nurse scientist with a focus in occupational health and safety. Today, she's going to highlight for us one of the really critical pieces of FCI, which is our educational outreach components. It's through education that we're able to translate the research that we're learning into practice with our fire departments and our firefighter partners. For today's session, we're happy to entertain questions either in the chat room. So if you look at the chat function down below and enter them into the room, or towards the end of Dr. Solle's presentation, we'll be able to entertain questions as well. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming our own Dr. Natasha Schaefer Solle, who will be presenting today on cancer prevention education curriculum.
Thank you, Dr. Juan Martinez, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm really excited to share with you some of the really great work that we've been putting into our education curriculum. So what I'm going to go through today is really a shortened version of the education curriculum. So the goal of the curriculum is to have our firefighters, leadership in the fire service share this with their department and have members, attend the curriculum or use the curriculum on their own. So you could see here on this first page, it's a login that firefighters will be given, and they're able to either choose a cancer survivorship or cancer intervention. So those who are in the survivorship intervention, only they are able to access that, as well as those who are in the education will only be able to access the education. So there are a lot of interactive videos within this curriculum. So for someone who's usually attending it or, taking the curriculum on their own, it's something that will last closer to 2 hours. So today, because we are, our seminar series is just an hour, I'm going to go through the slides. We'll skip over a lot of the interactive and the videos, but feel free, I'm still going to have some of the Q&A that is part of the curriculum still happen live. So if you guys want to put in the chat your answers, we can go through that as well. And so we'll go ahead and get started. So once a firefighter is invited to participate in the cancer education curriculum, they'll receive a link and then they'll receive this page. They're able to go into cancer education and it takes them right into the curriculum. So we're going to start cancer in the fire service. So really defining the scope of cancer burden in the fire service. So I will, you can see here, one of the first videos that starts this curriculum is advice from a cancer survivor. So a firefighter who is a cancer survivor. And this is something that any firefighter, when they're taking the curriculum, this will be the first thing that they see. The other thing to note with our curriculum is when they go through it. Today, obviously, I will be giving the presentation, but there is the option for firefighters that when they're taking the curriculum, that they will have a voiceover, that they'll be able to hear the presentation that I'm giving at the same time, rather than just reading it through. So for our curriculum, the learning objectives is 1, defining the scope of cancer burden in the fire service. 2, identifying firefighter occupational cancer risk. 3, describing cancer risk reduction behaviors and tools. So we'll talk about some non-modifiable risk factors and modifiable risk factors that we can use in the fire service to decrease their risk. 4, identify organizational level changes that can help reduce cancer risk. So really seeing how firefighters can work with their departments and leadership on making change that will help reduce their individual cancer risk. And lastly, we'll describe some resources that we've identified to firefighters that are diagnosed with cancer. So to start out with, we talk about the scope of the problem. So we know that 14% are more likely to be diagnosed with cancer compared to the general population. So we also know that cancer is a leading cause of firefighter deaths and risks that may be underestimated due to the healthy worker effect. So what is the healthy worker effect and what does that mean? So we know that firefighters, in order for them to be a firefighter, they must be healthy. They must be able to work and have the physical capability of being a firefighter. So automatically that puts them at a higher health rate than your general population. So we're looking at that and how that may also, with that, how that underestimates their risk for cancer. So some of the work that's also been done in the fire service, you can see here on the left, one of the trademark studies that have been done is a meta-analysis that was conducted at the University of Cincinnati, which compared the general population to firefighters and showing that firefighters are at a much higher risk for certain cancers, including testicular cancer, multiple myeloma, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, skin cancer, prostate, malignant melanoma, brain cancer, colon cancer, and leukemia. And so we saw that the probabilities of certain cancers in the firefighters over the instances were found in the general population. So looking at this bar graph, you can see 102% higher rate, 53% for multiple myeloma, 51% for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and 28% for prostate cancer. So another study that was conducted by NIOSH in 2016 demonstrated that firefighters experience cancer at a higher rate than the general population, 99% of a higher risk of being diagnosed, and 14% higher mortality rate from cancer compared to the general population. Another study we saw in San Francisco among female firefighters ages 40 to 50 years old in the San Francisco Fire Department, that the breast cancer rate in this department was found to be 6 times of the national average in this age group. And so after fighting a fire, so in 2018, a research program came out and they were sampling urine samples from firefighters before and after their shifts. And so looking at different exposures, they saw that there was a 2.9 to 5.3 higher rate. So post-fire of PAHs in their urine, averaging compared to their pre-urine. So we found, or not we, but San Francisco, the study found that there is hazardous chemicals that may have been absorbed through the skin post-fire, causing skin damage pre-fire. So really looking at exposure and how exposure to these chemicals are being metabolized in the body of the firefighter. So by taking these post-urine and skin evaluations. So in 2019, our colleagues here in Florida in the Firefighter Cancer Initiative were able to look at registry data and linkage. And so looking at data from the Florida firefighters and comparing that with the Florida Cancer Data Registry system and seeing what the linkage was. So again, we see here an increase with brain, colon, kidney, melanoma, prostate, testicular, and thyroid. And then we see an increased risk for melanoma and thyroid in our female firefighters. So here again, we have a video that Any attendee that is part of the curriculum will be able to watch. Most of the videos that you'll see, they average about 3 minutes per video, going through, and it's different leaders that talk about the concerns. So this video in particular is of a leader from the International Association of Firefighters, describing some of the initiatives that they have that they've taken part in, as well as what they're looking to do as, goal from a large organization to decrease the risk in the fire service. So once the participant finishes their first module, then there's a brief assessment and evaluation of their first module. So here we see question 1, firefighters are significantly more likely to be diagnosed with cancer compared to the general population. True or false? A participant will put true, and that is correct. Firefighters have a 9% higher risk of being diagnosed with cancer compared to the general population. And then this will take us right into our next module. So this next module goes into firefighter occupational cancer risk. So identifying different cancer risks that are specific to the firefighter occupation. As you can see, it's pretty easy for a user to move through. And so first thing we want to discuss is, what are firefighters exposed to? And so we know that firefighters are exposed to toxins considered either known carcinogens or probable carcinogens, some of them being PAHs, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, volatile organic compounds, such as benzene or formaldehyde, diesel exhaust from the trucks and anything they've been exposed to, as well as other compounds, such as asbestos when they're at buildings, or any other calls that they may go on that they don't know that they're being exposed to. The other thing we know is soot and soot particles. And so we know that if not removed, these contaminated exterior surfaces of the firefighter's PPE can result in exposure well after the fire. So something that we look at, and we try to make sure people are aware of, is that the neck area is one of the most likely areas to become contaminated. And so we'll talk more about this in the next module of ways to decrease our risk. But we can see here a firefighter cleaning their neck right after to decrease their risk. The other thing that's really important to know is the occupational exposure and how you could put family members and others outside of the fire house at risk. So for instance, your gear, taking it home with you, if a child is near it, if it's in your car, also doing different demonstrations. So, being sure that we're using clean gear whenever we are doing any type of demonstrations. And if you are bringing your gear, in your personal vehicle or at home, to make sure that it's in a sealed container so it's not off-gassing and being in contact with any of your family members. And so here's another interactive tool that we put together for any of the attendees that come and use the curriculum. So with firefighters, we know that we are exposed to different chemicals and different exposures from a fire. But here gives a little bit of an example. Here you see a living room. And so when something burns, we can see that electronic devices are a complex mixture of several hundred materials. So many of these materials, they contain toxic heavy metals, also lead and mercury. And so these are where we see some of these flame retardants and chemicals, which may put a firefighter at risk. The other thing you see here is a couch. So a couch, much like the electronics, also contain flame retardants. As many of you know, most furniture now, or all furniture, really has some type of flame retardant on it for safety, to decrease or to slow the burning down. But with that, these flame retardants, such as polybrominated diphenyl ethers, or PPDEs, are really carcinogenic and put you firefighters at risk. So really understanding when something's burning, how many of these chemicals are coming off and that you are being exposed to. And so the next thing we want to discuss is, where are the firefighters exposed? So, we talked about some of the compounds of exposure. And so some of the things to know is where you're being exposed. One is being on the scene, where you're exposed to the toxins that are released by the fire and any of the other compounds that are coming off of the burning materials. Also exposure at the station. So we talk about here exposure to the diesel exhaust, and also cross-contamination from the fire scene. So if gear is not being decontaminated right after a fire and it's coming back to the station dirty, or is being in your cab dirty, then firefighters are still being exposed to that on a cross-contamination field. And then also is en route. So also cross-contamination from the fire scene. So again, talking about if a firefighter is not decontaminating their gear, coming back into the cab with the fellow firefighters, you guys, everyone that is in that cab is being exposed, and not just the people that are in the cab at that moment, but also whoever rides in the cab the next day, if it wasn't disinfected correctly, or if the gear was in there that was not deconned. And so on the scene, we know that 99% of smoke particles collected during overhaul were less than 1 micron in diameter. So of these, 97% were too small to be visible by the naked eye, suggesting that what we know as clean air is not really clean. So there's an increased risk when PPE and SCBA are not worn properly or consistently, and that completing overhaul without SCBA or PPE also increases your risk for cancer, or really increases your risk for being exposed to some of these toxic compounds and carcinogens. So here in the vehicle, when we talked about transporting the contaminated gear in the cab or other vehicles, it really extends to the exposure of your harmful contaminants via PPE off-gassing. So by bringing in the non-decon gear, it's contaminating the cab of the vehicle. And then here we talk about at the station. So diesel exhaust, which is classified by multiple organizations as potential or likely carcinogenic, exposure when the trucks run in enclosed bays without proper ventilation. Also, it can contaminate the gear, ice machines, and other items that may be stored in the bay area. The other thing is PPE off-gassing. So we know that PPE collects contaminants during a fire. And so these contaminants can continue off-gassing from the PPE even after the fire. So remember of doffing of the gear, rehabbing if it's near the PPE. Exposure occurs when the trucks run in enclosed bays without proper ventilation, and transporting the gear in the engine cab. We also know that higher temperatures can accelerate off-gassing of the gear. And so here is another video that is really critical to show firefighters. And so I know we weren't going to show all the videos, but for those who have not seen this video, what it does, or what it shows, is how we've taken invisible dye and utilized it as soot instead of invisible dye, to really represent what the carcinogens, if you're not decontaminating, how they can come back into the station. So I will show this video just because it is pretty brief.
Right now, we think it's our leading health problem that we have within the fire service: cancer. It is at an epidemic.
Okay, I'm gonna stop because it's not showing, it's playing the wrong video, so we will get that fixed. But the invisible dye video does show how the dye transfer from the fire scene to the station and to the home, and how even though you cannot see with the naked eye, if decon is not happening, then you have the potential of having this all over the areas that you go after a fire. And so this is something that comes up often with firefighters when they say, how am I exposed, when you say inhalation or absorption or ingestion specifically. So inhalation is anything you can breathe in at the scene. So anytime that you're not on air and you not have your SCBA on, there is the potential that some of these compounds that you're breathing them in. The other thing is absorption. So toxins can be absorbed through your skin. And so we know that increases in temperature increases a skin's ability to absorb. The other thing we know is that the face, the jaw, neck, and throat area are more susceptible to these, to absorption. And so remembering that, if you're in a high temperature area, you're sweating, your pores are opening, and there's more likelihood that these chemicals that are microscopic are being absorbed into your skin. The other one that people always, or firefighters always ask about, is ingestion when they read this. How am I ingesting the toxins? And so some of the things that have come up is, when you're rehabbing, if you did not decon after, you not really clean your hands, and you just grab a granola bar, and your hands are dirty from the fire scene and you eat it, those compounds can be making their way through the oral cavity and into your system that way. Here we talk a little bit about some of the modifiable risk factors that we're going to be going into of sleep and nutrition. And then here is another assessment and evaluation. So firefighters face risk of exposure mainly through absorption, inhalation, ingestion, inhalation and absorption, or all of the above. So the answer is all of the above, that firefighters face risk of exposure from all of the above. Off-gassing of the contaminants from gear increases when temperature increases, when gear becomes wet, when contaminated gear is not bagged, or when bagged gear is placed in designated outside compartments. And so the answer is A and C. So firefighters mainly face risk of exposure when temperature increases or contaminated gear is not bagged. And so now this takes us to our next module. So far we've touched on, what is out there as far as cancer in the fire service, what the literature is, to what the risks are and how firefighters are at risk. And now we're going to learn on how we can reduce the cancer risk in the fire service. So here's another video that firefighters can watch about what has been done in decontamination research. And then we'll go here and go step by step. So reducing your risk at the scene. So we know to wear PPE and SCBA during all phases of firefighting and overhaul. Setting up a rehab in a cold zone away from the dirty gear. If you're setting up rehab in a cold zone, but you're near your gear, it really doesn't help because it's off-gassing. Complete post-fire on-scene gross decon. And so in the next few slides, we will really go step by step on each of the steps of decon. There's 2 videos that give the firefighters a step-by-step protocol of what they need to do and what materials are needed. You can see here, firefighters are cleaning off with wipes. So clean exposed areas with wipes before eating or drinking or after handling contaminated gear. So especially your hands, your neck, your face, try, not to cross-contaminate across body parts. I know when we've worked with a lot of the fire departments, they said, wipes are cheap, they're easy to buy. Don't feel like you need to, be stingy with the wipes. Use the wipes, use it on your face, get rid of it. Use it on your hands, get rid of it. Use them, multiple wipes to make sure you're not cross-contaminating. The other thing, making sure cleaning in between your eyelids, to make sure if any dirt, anything has gone in there. The other thing is implementing a on-scene hood and glove swap program. So this is something that a lot of local departments have started doing. It's pretty cost effective compared to getting second set of gear if that's not something that's within the budget of your department. So working on these little things, and if it's something that, your department can't afford of having a hood swap or a glove swap, but, at least doing the bare minimum of what you can do as far as using wipes. The other thing is a clean cab concept. So do not store your firefighting equipment in the apparatus cab. Storing the equipment and gear in curbside compartments if that's available. And then having a clean apparatus cab per department policy after every fire. So you're really looking to avoid cross-contaminating personal vehicles in other areas as well. And so you can see here, we've also been able to add some resources. So anyone that is part of the curriculum, they're able to click on that. And they'll be able to download those standing operating guidelines. So they have that as resources for them as well. Okay, and then we talked about your risk at the station. So what are some ways to reduce your risk at the station? So as far as diesel exhaust reduction, we know that, opening the garage doors before starting the vehicles, not running the vehicles in a closed bay. If possible, to keep the vehicle at least 15 to 20 feet away from the bay when running it. And then reducing your time the vehicle operates in the bay area. We also want to keep doors between the garage and the other areas of the firehouse closed, and store your gear away from the engines in a separate ventilated room if that's a possibility. Also working with your organization on implementing protocols to reduce the spread of contaminants at the station. Again, we do have this list of resources for controlling diesel exhaust inside the firehouse. So anyone that is part of the curriculum will be able to log in and have those as a resource for themselves. The other thing at the station is installing an engine exhaust removal system and filters, showering within the hour of returning from a fire incident, and keeping a clean change of clothes and shoes at the station. So remembering that you're not only washing your gear, but also your t-shirt and pants if you have other change of clothes there, and that you're cleaning them at the fire station. Keeping your gear away from the living quarters, keeping your lockers located in a well-ventilated area, and then practice routine gear cleaning in the house. Also scheduling professional gear cleaning. So again, each department is different as far as what resources they have and what they choose to do and what their protocol is. Some have second sets of gear, some have professional gear cleaning after a fire. So really working with the leaders of your department to figure out what is the best way for your department to, to decontaminate on a regular basis to make sure everyone is safe. The other thing is keeping the ice machines and water fountains away from the bay area. So we know that the diesel exhaust is in the bay, obviously when the trucks are running. So keeping any type of ice machine or water fountain or anything that firefighters will be ingesting out of that bay area. And here we talk about reducing risk with our hood and glove swap. So we know that dirty hoods result in an increased absorption risk. So needing to wash those hoods. So we do see hood swaps programs that have been very successful, both at the state level and the national level, that, once someone leaves a fire scene, they receive a new hood right then and there on the scene. And so you can see here in the NFPA bulletin, some information on hood swaps and about hoods. And so this is also something that as part of the curriculum, someone will be able to click on it and download and have that as a resource for themselves. And then again, talking about gear storage. So I know we've talked to many departments and not everyone is able to have a closed separate room for their gear. If they do that, that is ideal. But also keeping it as far away from the diesel exhausts. The other thing is, to reduce your exposure to off-gassing, isolating the gear when it's carried in personal vehicles. So you can see in some of the pictures here, firefighters have purchased these large Pelican cases that if you are a firefighter that needs to travel from station to station, or that you need to have your gear with you, to make sure it's in one of these enclosed cases, that it's not off-gassing. We also see here with our decon on scene that coming back to the fire station, they're bagging their gear so it's not off-gassing in the cab. And then here again, we talk about our clean cab concept, placing the fire equipment in the outside compartments, using materials inside out, easy to contaminate, and light color interior that's non-absorbent materials. So vinyl seats instead of fabric, anything that you can really wipe down and that, soot or carcinogens are not being absorbed into. And here you can see a picture. This is a fire truck from Coral Springs Fire, where they've implemented the clean cab concept. And so they have little compartments on the outside of the truck where all of their gear can go. So here, as we talked about with the surfaces, trying to make them as smooth as possible, keeping electronics as far off the floor as possible, and having non-porous materials. So also, working from an organizational level to creating policies within your department that allows for cleaning or decontaminating the cab at least once a month. For many firefighters that we've worked with, a lot of them say that they clean it more often than once a month, once a shift or once a week. So that's something, again, really focusing on what your policy is within your department on how to keep the cabs clean. So upon returning to the fire, sorry about that, showering within the hour as you return to the department, having a second set of uniform and personal clothing and footwear. Also, station washing machines for your jumpsuit or your uniforms. So you can see there, a firefighter is washing their gear or their uniform there at the station. So really that's to, keep your exposures. Everyone's there at the station. You're not bringing that back home with you. Some departments also have an extractor where you're able to wash your PPE, and some departments have a professional company that comes and picks up the gear. So really, again, it depends on what the policy is within your department, but as long as you're getting your gear cleaned, that is the priority. So here are certain things that you can do at your fire station. So again, no PPE in the living quarters of the fire station, which I think most departments have implemented. Moving your ice machines out of the bays. Also implementing AC positive pressures or blowers to keeping as much of the exposures in the compounds out into the bay areas and not into the living quarters. And then also installing hand cleaner stations. So something very simple, which now obviously in the light of COVID, I think they're probably more so around the stations than ever before. So this is another resource that was created for our decontamination. And so this will be also a downloadable document for firefighters that they can use. And it really goes through exactly, when you're at a fire scene, where you should be, parking the apparatus, how it's in a cold zone, where you're doing your rehab and doing your cleanup and hood swap and glove swap. So if you're following along, you'd be staying on air when you're deconning here. Then you would come and doff your gear, come over here and wipe. So you can see here, you're on air, off air where you're wiping. off, and then heading into rehab. Heading back to the station here, you're showering within the hour. And then, at this point, you should not be exposing or off-gassing anything into your car or your home. And so this is another video. This goes through a step-by-step of exactly what should be happening for on-scene gross decontamination. And then here we have another video that goes into gross decontamination frequently asked questions. So when we had put these videos together, a lot of questions came out regarding, if I go into a fire and I do a gross decon on scene, and then we get called in for another fire, can we do that? So yes, and as long as you're, air drying your gear out, and then you get called for another fire, because it's really important that you're only wetting the outer layer and not the inner layer of the gear. The other thing that, some of the questions we answer is about the weight. Some concerns came up about, after you're doing the gross decon and your gear is hosed down with the water, if it would be heavy. And so you'll see in the video that it's an increase of about 2 pounds. So trying to really answer the main questions that came out about decon, and to mitigate any of the concerns that firefighters may have. And so here's some of the tools for improvement. So we talk about the post decon kit. Right there, you see a picture of it. Many of you, if you are in the state of Florida that are joining us, you are familiar with the green buckets. All departments should have them. It was something that was implemented about 2 years ago. That includes the Dawn dish soap, the scrub brush, the hose nozzle that attaches to the fire apparatus hose, so each firefighter can do a gross decon. Within those green buckets also has the standard operating guidelines, which also will be included in this curriculum. So anyone that is participating in the curriculum can then download the guidelines. Again, we talked about clean cabs, standard operating guidelines, extractors, having a second set of gear, a direct source capturing device within the bays, also using a half mask for driver operators. So we have done a research study showing that even in the cold and warm zones, that carcinogens are still in that area. So it is recommended that our driver operators who are there are wearing a half mask. And then also we have the PER application, which is our personal exposure reporting application. It's a mobile app that firefighters are able to log into and report their exposures. So it's a really good way to track for them personally. Us as researchers are able to see them, and it's de-identified, but just for us to be able to see what firefighters are being exposed to when they're on the field and how often. And then for the firefighters, it's a way for you to track personally what you've been exposed to and how many fires and what type of incidents you've been at. So now we go into the next assessment. So exposure at the station can be minimized by keeping the doors between the garage and the other areas closed, keeping engine running in a closed bay, showering within the hour at the station, A and C, or all of the above. So we know the answer is A and C. So keeping doors from the bay to the other areas and showering within the hour will minimize exposure at the station. At the station, actions that can help reduce risk include reducing diesel exhaust in the bays, keeping gear away from living quarters, using commercial grade washer designed for bunker gear, keeping lockers in a well-ventilated area, or all of the above. And so we know it's all of the above. All of these things will minimize exposure at the station. So here's an activity, and I'll go through this activity with you. This is a case study. So we wanted to not only have this as a lecture for people that are utilizing the curriculum, but also make it interactive. So We can go through this. At the station, a firefighter arrives to his shift and soon after walks to get some ice for a glass of water from the ice machine in the bay area. As the firefighter returns to living quarters, the doors to the bay are left open. While the firefighter is discussing recent procedure changes with the team, the call is received. The team then prepares to answer the call. While the team finishes up, the engine is turned on before bay doors are open to help save some time. Once the team is ready and on the truck, they depart the station en route to the scene. At the scene, the team dons gear properly and begins fire suppression activities. During the fire suppression, team members are pulled from the fire to rehab. Once fire suppression activities are completed, the team then performs overhaul. Because the air is visibly clear, SCBA is removed during overhaul procedures. After completing overhaul, the team doffs gear and places the gear in the engine cab for the ride back to the station. When the team arrives at the station, gear is packed in lockers in the bay area, and the team then heads to living quarters to rest as they wait for the next call. So what can be done differently? So really looking at each case, we see that door between the bay area and living quarters should always remain closed. We then talked about them starting the truck to save time, and we recommend that bay doors should be open before starting the engine. Firefighters should be careful to complete some kind of decon prior to hydrating and going to rehab to avoid accidentally ingesting the toxins. SCBA should be worn during overhaul. Even though the air may appear clear, it may still contain some toxins. Post-fire on-scene gross decon should be completed. So there was no decon even mentioned in that case study. And then also SCBA should be worn during overhaul, even though the air may appear clear. Okay, so then this will take us to our next module of organizational level change in the fire service. So at an organizational level, one of the studies that we've conducted is the FAST-C, so the Firefighter Cancer Initiative. We surveyed over 100 Florida firefighters and asking questions about what would drive success in creating a cancer screening or cancer prevention program. And so factors that really supported the fire department offering cancer screening activities, the three main things that came out were a written policy, a dedicated occupational health and safety program, as well as dedicated health and safety officers. And so we thought this was really critical because it had nothing to do with department size, budget, or makeup, whether it be volunteer career or the location of the fire service. None of those were driving factors into the success of a cancer prevention program. So it's really important to know, these are three things that, departments could implement without it being, a huge budget cost to them. And so, to drive change, if you're at a department, you're wondering, what can we do? How can we make changes, in the world of cancer prevention? These are the things that came out within this survey. So here are just a few examples of different organizations throughout the country that have developed different programs to decrease risk. So our Florida Firefighter Safety and Health Collaborative, they are a group of firefighters from started with just Florida, but have really made connections on a national level. And they provide education and resources for Florida firefighters to reduce cancer risk. We saw that Jacksonville Fire was one of the first departments in the state of Florida that implemented the shower within the hour program. And then in Washington State, we saw a healthy in, healthy out, best practice for reducing firefighter risk to exposure and carcinogens with a flip book and a video. Also, Boston Fire implementing steps to reduce risk and developed educational videos. And then finally, San Antonio, full bunker gear and SCBA should be worn throughout overhaul. So that was another policy that was put into place. So just some examples to show what different departments and different organizations across the country are doing to mitigate the risk of their members. Okay. Another video that, participants will be able to watch. This is specific to Florida, and the video is with the state fire marshal. Here, so which of the following organizational level factors help reduce cancer risk for firefighters? So keeping doors between the garage and the other areas closed, keeping the engine running in a closed bay, showering within the hour. So again, this was earlier, but I think, it can be used in the same point as far as our organizational level. And finally is our ongoing learning resources. So this just provides some resources that participants will be able to click on and take them to the different websites of different organizations and resources. So one being the Firefighter Cancer Initiative, that they'd be able to go to our website and see exactly all of the projects that we have going on, as well as the IFF, the Florida Firefighters Safety and Health Collaborative, the Firefighter Cancer Support Network, and the National Fire Protection Association. Again, this video will show other ways to find different resources related to cancer and the fire service. And so that concludes the curriculum. We do have another section, a pretty lengthy section on modifiable risk factors, which includes sleep, diet, physical activity. But because of time, we skipped over that, but that's also part of module 3. So at this point, I'm going to open it up to questions. I know I can see the little button that says that there are some questions in the chat, and so I will stop sharing.
Thank you, Dr. Solle, for your presentation. Yes, we do have a few questions. The first one is from Mark Livingston. He said, Dr. Solle, it was said early on that you were invited to be a part of this curriculum. How can I get signed up to be a part of this education for myself and department? Thank you.
Yep, so we are in the midst of doing that right now. So we are actually doing our first presentation live with Pasco County tomorrow. And then we're waiting a few more basically regulatory IRB approvals, and then we will send it out, and it will be pretty much either you can do it personally or you can do it through your department that you're able to sign up. So it'll be very similar to how we do our other research projects or initiatives, that we send out a link, and if you're interested in participating, then you can just sign up.
Awesome, thank you. The next question is, will there be any mention of PFAS in this curriculum that is made up of DWR, durable water repellent, that are contained in our structural and wildline PPE, specifically in respect to the hazards that are present in early stages of PFAS test tape versus the later stages of PFAS dust and shedding hazard?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. Matt, thank you for bringing it up. So it is not in the curriculum right now, but I think it's something that definitely can be added. With this curriculum, when we actually started a couple years ago, and we've pilot tested it twice now. And so I think, with PFAS, that it's, kind of a hotter topic now than it was a couple years ago. But it is something that we should definitely add. So I appreciate that. We'll definitely take note of that.
Okay, and then the last two questions are from Mr. Jeff Orthman. He wanted to know how he could access the PowerPoint to this presentation. He would like to show it, I guess, to others.
So all of our seminars will be, so this recorded version will be on our website. And then once the final version of the curriculum is IRB approved, we will be sending it out through all of our, either our communication through our newsletter or through our social media, that you'll be able to join it and you'll have full access to everything.
And then I see that there's one hand raised in the group of attendees. If you don't mind putting it, oh, now two, if you don't mind putting it in the chat, that way we can answer it.
Yeah, and feel free if any, are they able to ask questions live or are they only able to ask the Q&A?
I'm not exactly sure. Oh, there's another question. Okay. Other than the San Francisco study, which has initial results published in 2018, do we have further research related to female firefighter reproductive organ cancers?
We don't have any right now within the curriculum, but it is something that we could look up to see if there's been any other research done recently that we can add. I know there are some people doing some work specifically with females, you know, us included, in Florida and FCI. Where we're at is very preliminary, so we have not have anything published yet. And so I'm not sure what has been published in other areas, but it is something we can look at and add to that slide. So I appreciate that. Oh, thank you, Matt. So the study on breast milk and PFAS contamination. That is true. We can definitely add that one. That's a newer one with Dr. Burgess. Okay.
Are there any other questions for Dr. Solle before we wrap up?
All right. Well, thank you all again for coming to our seminar series. We really appreciate it. Again, remember next month it will be a different time than our usual. So we will be doing it on December.
It will be
15th?
yeah, 15th or 14th. I can't recall off the top of my head, but we'll send reminders to everyone just like we did this week. So you can keep it in the back of your head. Next month will be PFAS. It will be presented by my colleague Viola and Alex Cruz, including myself, and we'll be presenting on the FCI PFAS pilot study.
Yep. So thank you guys, and please feel free if you have any questions or any other comments, anyone can email me. Happy to take, we love your feedback. So we really appreciate you being here.